podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
With Vanguard Advice, no matter what your retirement goals are, they can help you get there and enjoy it for years to come. The financial journey is all yours, but you never have to take it alone. That's the value of ownership. Visit Vanguard.com and explore Vanguard Advice. All investing is subject to risk. Fund shareholders own the funds that own Vanguard. Services are provided by Vanguard Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor.
Love tennis with Matchpoint Tennis Championships. Take it to the courts with the brand new tennis sim with dynamic gameplay and a true taste of tennis.
Welcome back to another Love Tennis Podlet. Possibly the last Podlet, in fact, because we might just be doing full-length pods from here on in. Wimbledon is 13 days old in 2022. Means there's only one day left. There are only 2 matches to go. We have today the men's singles final and, George, the quizzical look. You know what the other match is today. It's the women's doubles final, which actually could be really good. It's Mertens and Zhang against Krejcikova and Siniakova, which is high-powered doubles final, but it may well be completely ignored because it will follow the Djokovic-Kyrgios men's singles final. We should start, though. George Belshaw is here, in case you've forgotten who he is. I'm James Gray, in case you've forgotten who I am. And we should start by talking about the women's final yesterday, where Elena Rybakina came from a set down to beat Ons Jabeur. She won 3-6, 6-2, 6-2 in an hour and 51 minutes. It really was a match of 2 halves. Ons dominated the first set, but then was dominated by big-hitting Rybakina in the next 2, and she came through it. She almost didn't react when she won it. She walked to the net and said well done to Ons, and then waved to the crowd. And in fact, almost throughout, she did not react. Jabeur said afterwards, I think I need to teach her how to celebrate, which seems like a reasonable thing to say. But she did kind of break, for want of a better word, when Molly McAwee of The Telegraph asked her if she'd spoken to her parents yet and what she thought they would say when she did. And she said, I think they'll be proud, and then was just unable to speak because she was crying. And it's always weird when people break down in press conferences, George, isn't it? Because you don't really know what you want to do is go up and give them a hug, and obviously you can't really do that. And Faye, the moderator, sort of said, "Oh, do you want to wrap it up there?" And Elena said, "No, it's okay. And then she said, sort of laughingly, "You wanted some emotion," and we kind of laughed. And then she said, "Oh, just kept it in too long," which I thought was a very kind of meaningful thing to say. And then there's this sort of spontaneous round of applause, sort of well done for crying, dear. I don't know, it was I think it was just the only way we could show support. Just like, the awkward silence wasn't a great option, so maybe applause is the best one, George. I mean, it's always difficult when that happens, isn't it?
It's also cringe. Just one very quick point before I go to that. My quizzical look was at only 2 matches, James, because there's a host of matches today, including Big Alfie Hewitt in the wheelchair final.
That's a good point. I've actually neglected quite a lot of the order of play there. It's the men's boys final as well.
2 matches on centre, I'm sure is what you meant to say.
Exactly.
But anyway, I mean, it was an interesting match, wasn't it? I mean, we both thought Rybakina would win, and I think how we thought the match would play out kind of did in the second and third sets. It felt to me that Jabeur, her craftiness kind of wore thin in the end. It didn't really get going, but it felt at the start of the match that Rybakina perhaps wasn't there, like whether the nerves were kind of taking control. She really missed a lot of poor short balls. James, you rightly kind of said in our WhatsApp chat that it felt quite a big part of the match was going to be how much Jabeur can draw Rybakina up towards the net, basically, and on kind of shorter balls, because she really didn't look that comfortable when these awkward slicey things were dropping about 3 foot away from the net. So, yeah, I thought it was an interesting match. I guess my one regret from it is that it never felt really like both players played at their best at the same time. I thought Jabeur did play really good stuff, in the first set. Forehand was working way better than it had been in the previous match against Tatiana Maria, but then it just sort of went away again. But I enjoyed the match. It was two interesting styles. I think Rybakina probably deserved the tournament on balance. I mean, if you look at the players she came through versus Jabeur, as nice a story as Jabeur would have been, felt to me more like Rybakina had earned, in inverted commas, a Grand Slam from the caliber of opponent she beat throughout. But yeah, I think the most interesting question for me now, aside from whether Jabeur can teach Rybakina how to celebrate a little bit more enthusiastically, is kind of where these two players go now.
Well, Jabeur said afterwards that she had taken a lot from getting to the final. She said, "I know that I'm going to come back and win a Grand Slam for sure. This is tennis, losing that is, and it's part of it. I have to learn from it, but I'm very, very positive about it." I mean, I do think she will win a Grand Slam. Lots of people disagree. I know you disagree, George. I mean, my point would be that this is an era when there are going to be lots of opportunities to win Grand Slams. Iga Świątek cannot win every week, as has been proven. Naomi Osaka is not going to play every week, as has been proven. Emma Raducanu has a long way to go to be a dominant force. Coco Gauff similarly has inconsistencies and plenty of off weeks. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities, and Jabeur is solid enough, talented enough, and skillful enough that she will take one of those opportunities.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I really like Ons Jabeur. I think there's so much about her game that is excellent as a spectacle. And, obviously she's just got to a Grand Slam final. And normally my shtick is once a player reaches a final, they're going to be more experienced for the next time and know how to handle it and then kind of kick on, if you like. But I'm still worried she has limitations in her game that the very, very best players, if they meet her in a big match, will overcome. And it kind of felt like that with Rybakina yesterday, that she just hits the ball that bit deeper, that bit harder. With Jabeur's game, everything is very, very kind of fine margins in terms of if you don't get that drop shot right and it lands on the service line rather than halfway up towards the service line, it's a bad shot and it's an easy put away. Because she's playing so much slice on the forehand, she gets a little less consistency on the kind of hitting through. She doesn't really play topspin at all, really, on the forehand. It's almost quite a flat shot. It's quite hard to move between the two shots. So I don't know. But the thing is, she's excellent on both the clay and the grass. I don't see her winning a hard court slam. Maybe that's a bit harsh, but I think she's got a better chance on what we call the natural surfaces. And the problem with her is I think Świątek's going to be winning the clay most of the time. That's where she's best. So you are really looking at Wimbledon. And it's perfectly possible, don't get me wrong, it doesn't suit players like Osaka at the moment. Świątek, you think, will get better. But yeah, I'm just not 100% convinced that her game will hold up in a tougher Grand Slam draw against those kind of bigger, more dominant players. But as you rightly say, James, it's always a bit pointless making prediction in the women's game, and these draws do open up, and she could have been playing anyone in the final based on the previous sets of rounds. It just was not a great draw for her on the day.
Yeah, I think also I thought nerves would play a part. Of course, it's a final. They'd both never been in one before. I thought Jabeur would get doinked by nerves, quite frankly. And I thought she held up okay. I don't think it was nerves that did her in. I think Rybakina played very well and hit her off the court to an extent. You say they didn't both play their best at the same time. I think there was a brief period, the first 5 games of the second set, albeit Rybakina won 4 of them. They were good, Matt. They were good games. There were break points in every single game, like 5 consecutive games with break points. I think there were 12 deuces across 3 games at one point. Like it was a competitive bit, and what I liked about it was it was exactly what I wanted to see. It was the boxing match of a big puncher against a counter puncher, and in boxing, counter punching isn't quite the same as tennis, but it's that kind of almost brains against brawn. Because the thing about Ons, right, is I partly think she will win a Grand Slam. I partly want her to, because She is so entertaining to watch. She can do so many different things with a tennis ball. I know she doesn't have the big topspin forehand, but everyone's got one of those. Everyone else has got one of those. Let them do the big hitting. Let her not only do interesting things in a tennis perspective, but also she lives on the court. You know exactly how she's feeling all the time. There were just little things like she missed a serve and it got returned on the volley, and she hit a sort of Alan Shearer header back over the net, which was quite funny. And she hit a couple of tweeners on chasing down lobs, and she just has personality. And I'm not saying Rybakina doesn't, but she certainly doesn't show much. She's very internalized, and she does keep it bottled up. And she's also young and not used to the big spotlight, really. I know she's 25 in the world, but realistically she's not. And she's also, and I guess we'll come on to this, she's also kind of hiding something, which is not really her fault. But for people who don't know, Elena Rybakina was born in Moscow. She grew up in Moscow. She didn't get a huge amount of support from the Russian Federation because she was 500 in the world when she was 18. And the Kazakhstan Tennis Federation, who are extremely well moneyed, came along with an offer that just made her life easier. And so she changed citizenship, and she now represents Kazakhstan. And the Kazakh Tennis Federation have done a huge amount to help her, clearly. And the difficult factor is that she is still based in Russia, really. Her parents live in Russia. She says, I live on tour. I train in Slovakia and Dubai and Florida. But the reality is that she is based in Russia. And that's not illegal. And it's not like she's Putin's, Secretary of Defense. But it creates difficult questions, of course, that she will get asked probably quite regularly now. She's learned how to deal with them. She played the I don't really understand the question line yesterday, and what she didn't do was I don't really understand the question and then stop talking, because then they ask it again. She said, I don't really understand the question, but I'm Kazakhstan, they supported me, I'm proud to represent Kazakhstan, and that's probably the way to deal with it. It's not really fair that someone like her ends up in the middle of it, but equally, you kind of have to ask the question, because as anyone who follows me on Twitter knows, the Russian Tennis Federation did stand up yesterday and say, we won Wimbledon.
I mean, it's certainly made it all very awkward for the All England club, given the move they've got. I mean, aside from them trying to claim the victory, I suppose the flip side is you could somewhat argue it's a defeat for Russia for letting such a hot talent be lured away by Kazakhstan when they were younger. She felt she wasn't getting the support from the Russian Federation. I know that'll probably do very little to ease Wimbledon's concerns about it. But yeah, I mean, you're right, James. So it is an awkward one, and we've said this the whole time about this whole kind of Russian fiasco. It's never been about the individual in this thing, is it? It's more about the, for want of a better word, the arseholes trying to claim this is a victory for Russia, and that's kind of exactly what's happened, and that was what Wimbledon was trying to avoid in the first place, which has kind of spectacularly backfired in many ways, given the consequences of now. I mean, we've got a Russian men's number one and a Russian-born women's champion anyway, so it's not gone well, and it may have kind of a lot of knock-on effects for the British game, regarding perhaps the promotion of Queens not becoming a Masters, for example. So it's ended up a bit of a sorry affair, actually, to be honest. I was always a bit 50-50 on it the whole time, as you'll be shocked to know. I was always slightly on the fence. I did kind of lean towards them slightly in favour of the ban, but I do wonder if there'll be some question marks over whether it was worth it in the end. But, it's, as I say, it's certainly not a stick we should be beating Rybakina with. She played a great tournament, beat a lot of quality players. It's more unfortunate happenstance, if you like.
Yes, I do agree. But I also know that people will have a go at journalists for asking the question. The Sunday Times do a lot of great work, and it's part of their remit to do investigative journalism, to create these questions and to try and shine a light where otherwise there wouldn't be one shone. But to talk more about Elena Rybakina's tennis, which is excellent, Where does she go from here, George? She will obviously earn 2,000 ranking points, which will... no, hang on. That's not going to happen, is it? It would, if she were to take the points that she deserves, 2,000 of them, it would catapult her pretty much up to the edge of the top 10. I mean, because I'm looking at it, and if you just add 2,000 points onto her tally, it does take her to number 6 in the world. But obviously, no one else is getting points, and I haven't done the maths. But, I mean, frankly, none of the top 15 have picked up that many points at Wimbledon, fictional points. Is she a legitimate top 10 player, George? And where do we see her being a threat? The US Open, for example, she's going to turn up as the newest Grand Slam champion, although that doesn't always count for much.
Yeah, I mean, on the ranking points bit, I think... if that was in the men's game, that would be more damaging than the women's in many ways, because the men's rankings are pretty set to me in terms of you've roughly got the top 4 as the top 4 best players in the world at the minute. You've roughly got the top 8 being 8 of the very best guys on tour. You've got vaguely the top 16 being up there as well. Whereas there's a lot of players in that top 10 in the women's game right now I look at and I think there are comfortably 10 better players than you, in the nicest way possible. I think they're all good top pros, but because of so many weird storylines in the women's game over the last few years, the seedings feel slightly less relevant to me in many ways, because there's so much chaos.
Danielle Collins, world number 7. I don't think any of us think that's normal.
Yeah, Kontaveit isn't the second best player in the world either, let's be honest. Well, Jabeur, I think, is about to go up to number 2, possibly. Or
no, she's going
to
go
go down. She was 2 before. She's going down the other way, isn't it? She was 2.
5.
Yeah, it's all such a mess. If you ask me my top 5 at the minute, it would probably be Swiatek, Osaka, maybe Goff creeping in as number 5. I still think someone like Andreescu could easily be a top 5 player if she gets fit and back to form. Muguruza, if she pulled herself together, could be comfortably top 5. 4 of those aren't really that close to be honest. So I'm not so worried about it from that point, even though it must be like hugely frustrating not to pick up 2,000 points for the best tournament of your entire career. In terms of where I think she can go, far, really. As you say, the consistency is the big problem, but her game is big enough, powerful enough, and this tournament consistent enough to really trouble anyone on her day. There aren't many harder hitters on the women's tour. Probably the Osaka's the one that pops to mind as someone who could trade with her as deep and heavily as Rybakina hits it. So yeah, I see no reason why she can't be a top 5 player and why she can't win multiple slams, but it's a bit foolhardy predicting anything in the women's game, really. And you never know how someone's going to react to winning a first slam. Like, for some players, that's enough. And I'm not saying she'll be one of them. She seems to me quite level-headed and focused and on to kind of the next stage in many ways. And almost the lack of emotion after it is quite a good thing sometimes in a weird way, in the sense of like, I should achieve this. Like, right, it's on to the next one. It's kind of quite level.
I don't know if that's what it is, though. Like, I agree with you, and I remember Calvin saying after Norrie won his quarterfinal, he's like, yeah, I like the reaction there. Says that this isn't the achievement, this is part of the journey. But I don't think that's what that was. I think she just doesn't really show much emotion. That's just not really her style. But I do know what you mean. It's just not her, I think.
What about you? Where do you think she'll go? Do you think?
I think basically it depends on where the other players like her end up, because I think probably if she's up against the players who are like her but just do it better, like Osaka, to an extent Swiatek, Goff certainly, although I'm not convinced that Goff is necessarily better than her at the moment. But players like that, who have similar weapons and rely on similar things. I think in those circumstances, she probably loses. But I think she beats a lot of the less powerful women on tour. I think she beats Sakari, she beats Badosa, she beats Pegula. I sort of 7 times out of 10 at the moment, and that'll get her a lot. That'll get her a long way. I guess it's about consistency. Someone pointed out to me that before the pandemic, she was the form player in world tennis.
Yeah.
So clearly she's got a lot to offer, and she's not going away. And she's part of a good team. She goes all over the world. She's pretty comfortable with traveling. She seems very settled. So yeah, I don't know if she's going to be top 5 for long, but I can see her being top 5, and I can see her maybe picking up another slam.
She probably was up there with the most adversely affected players in terms of the pandemic. I mean, purely in terms of tennis, and not in terms of any kind of emotional, kind of more real life stuff, I suppose. But she was really, really, really bloody good right before that kind of came in. And then it perhaps didn't quite click since coming back. It's not been terrible, don't get me wrong. She's still a very top-end WTA player. But I think from where some people saw her kind of taking off, it perhaps got stuck on the runway a little bit.
I mean, just to give people an idea of how informed she was, in terms of like tour level, she reached 4 finals in 2020. She only won one of them. She won the title in Hobart. She got to the final in Shenzhen. She got to the final in St. Petersburg and Dubai, and then the pandemic happened. I mean, that is a 2-month run that's pretty admirable.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because I think the question marks perhaps about her before, I think she didn't have the greatest record both against top 10 players and in finals. I think had quite bad losing records, or at least losing runs against those types of players. So to kind of put that to bed on such a big stage speaks volumes about her, to be honest, and where I think she can go from there. So, yeah.
Before this final, she had lost her last 5 matches to top 10 players, which, probably is what you're referring to. And it kind of... It's one of those silly situations where you sort of go, let's wait and see if this is the start of something, because we don't know whether it's the start of something or the end of something, as is always the case with the women's game, I suppose, at the moment, just the way it is.
When it comes to wardrobe staples, the things that feel as good as they look are what we wear again and again. But finding those perfect closet additions can be tough, especially in the shoe department. Unless you're shopping at Rothy's and their sustainably made, machine-washable shoes that are built to last because they knit both style and comfort into every pair. The Rothy's signature sneaker combines game-changing comfort with a tirelessly cool look, so it goes with every outfit, from casual to elevated. And their one-of-a-kind driving loafers feel great with or without socks and come in classic colors and eye-catching patterns. Forget about the break-in periods you expect from other shoes. The soft, flexible materials and wildly comfortable Rothy's insoles make their shoes one of the most wearable right out of the box. Find out what the hype is all about. Discover your new favorite pair of shoes and get $20 off your first purchase at rothys.com/hype. That's ROTHYS.com/hype.
Now, before we move on to talk about Nick Kyrgios, we should talk about his video game. Well, it's not his video game, but he certainly features in Matchpoint Tennis Championships as one of the licensed players you can play as. There's loads of them. Carlos Alcaraz is on there as well. Some of the stars of the women's game too. Gabinya Muguruza, Victoria Azarenka, and many, many others. It's a great game. They've been kind enough to support us through the whole of Wimbledon. We've also, George and I have had the chance to play it. It came out earlier this week on the 7th of July, so you can buy it now from Game. George and I have played it quite a lot, and we've really enjoyed it. It's a genuine kind of immersive sim. It takes a bit of getting used to, as all video games should. But it's really good fun. The multiplayer element, which is only really just starting to kick off, obviously, because it's only just been released, is great. You can cross-platform game online, so I've got an Xbox, but you can play it on PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, on PC, and you can play online against each other. Next week, when Wimbledon is out the way, I will stick my handle on Twitter and expect lots of teenagers to start sending me angry abuse over voice message. But we might also play some tennis, so I look forward to that. George, if you were playing today and I made you play as Nick Kyrgios, which you probably would anyway, and you were up against one of the great returners, what would your strategy be? I mean, obviously you have to serve well.
Yeah. Well, I think I said last time I played Matchpoint Tennis, the only thing that was kind of keeping me in the matches was the ability to just keep hanging on to my serves slightly. I found that slightly easier getting the serve in all the time in tough positions rather than the ground strokes. But yeah, I mean, look, in all seriousness, it's going to be a tough ask for Kyrgios. It will be a tough ask for Novak as well. I mean, I think we shouldn't underestimate how much Nick will get Novak out of his comfort zone. I don't think it's just as simple as kind of serve versus return, as some will kind of try and reduce it to. Nick's serve is pretty bloody good, let's be honest. I mean, it's the disguise on it that makes it so tough. I mean, it's one of those you're watching in real life, you've got no idea where he's about to put it, and that kind of shows with this kind of high ace count and unpredictability. But it's also what he's going to bring to the points. Sometimes he will try and drag out some longer rallies very occasionally, but often it's very short, sharp, quick ways of ending it, and Novak won't necessarily kind of like that. I think against a lot of other players, he'd like be able to get the serve back in against the big servers and almost reset the point and know, okay, Isner's not going to be able to hit through me here. Like, I'm going to make this as uncomfortable. But Kyrgios is a much better kind of ground stroke player than a lot of the other big servers, and he's got a lot more variety, a lot more unpredictability. So that does kind of bring a fresh angle of challenge to Novak. I do think Novak will win. That said, I think he kind of has too much in the locker and too much experience. But yeah, I just hope it gets to a bit of a fever pitch, the match. I do hope it kind of boils up and becomes an atmosphere, and both, it's feeling a little bit too nicey for me before the match, and I hope that was just a bit of a charade. When they get back on there, they remember why they were clubbing bits out of each other verbally in the first place. But that's just a petty wish from a sadistic person, I suppose.
Renaud Liechtenstein has been appointed chair umpire for the match just in the last hour or so, and I think I hope he has a busy day, because as you say, George, I know sometimes we clutch our pearls and go, "Oh, isn't this terrible for tennis?" But I think the reality is that a bit of drama never hurt anyone, and as long as Nick isn't screaming at line judges and bullying invariably female officials, then I'm okay with it.
Well, we might talk about this a bit more in detail in another day, but I went to watch McEnroe's documentary this week. And McEnroe's obviously kind of come back into the media picture and the kind of storytelling around this final, because there's people are saying it's the most bad boy Wimbledon final since like McEnroe Connors. And yeah, that was a really fascinating watch this week, kind of getting into the headspace of what was kind of happening with McEnroe in those matches. And, Calvin's always been like very much, Kyrgios is totally different to McEnroe. McEnroe was only ever doing it to win or whatever. But I just think this is such a fascinating final in so many ways. It feels like it'll be on tenterhooks the whole time, and one moment could just make it totally implode. Not to mention the tennis itself should be pretty top draw, because they're both fantastic players. Kyrgios is brimming with natural talent, so much power, so much variety, and Novak is, I don't really get it when people say Novak's style's boring. Like, I watched that bloke run across the court, become like Stretch Armstrong and put his legs in the most ridiculous positions. I'm like, this guy's a complete freak of nature. I don't understand like how people are like not more in awe of some of the stuff he does on the court all the time. But I think, as well as the kind of stuff that's gone under the bridge and the bad boy, articles or whatever, as you say, often styles do make matches, and this is a great match in terms of two completely different styles, two players who they'll see how they want the match to go in totally different ways in terms of point by point. Novak will want long drawn out rallies where he can just probe but Kyrgios's backhand, keep him moving around, test his physical fitness, get him around the court. Kyrgios will want to be hitting through this guy, breaking his resistance, not letting him find rhythm, serving to perfection. It'll be a really fascinating match. So, yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to it, and I'm very jealous you get a live centre court seat, James.
Well, TBC on the actual seat, but yeah, I hope so. I've specifically requested one with a desk because I can't wedge a laptop between my knees for 3 hours again. In terms of what Kyrgios called a bromance, what Djokovic said wasn't quite a bromance, but they've been kind of exchanging Instagram stories this week in a kind of quite cringy way, saying, "Oh, ask me out for dinner, loser pays." Kyrgios saying, "Yeah, let's go to a nightclub and go nuts." I mean, look, this isn't going to happen because they do not have the same idea of a night out. I can guarantee you that. But,
I've seen Djokovic out with his top off before, to be fair.
Yeah, maybe. I just can't really see it, George, if I'm honest. Well,
Djokovic will have the Champions Ball to go to if he does win. Kyrgios might do as well, of course.
Look, do we think that they really are friends? And I've said this before. I think Nick only misbehaves when he doesn't respect the opponent on the other side of the net. And I think he does respect Novak now. I wonder whether the occasion might get the better of him, though, because often it's just a reaction to stress, not a reaction to anything else. What do you think, George?
Yeah. I mean, I think he does respect Rafa, and he can still misbehave in those matches. So it's not necessarily a pure respect thing, I wouldn't say. I still think a lot of this is not fake, but kind of played up, this kind of new bromance or whatever. I still think there will be stuff under the surface. But as you say, James, I don't think it takes what the other bloke is doing down the other end of the court to wind Kyrgios up. He'll find something somewhere. The crowd will play an important part, I think, as well. You heard them booing Kyrgios's name when Djokovic had finished his his on-court interview. And you also heard them not giving Novak much love in that match as well. So, some will try and frame it as the most unpopular Wimbledon final of all time, which I think is a bit harsh, to be honest, because I've seen some fairly drab Wimbledon finals that I imagine the crowd would never be particularly warm to. But yeah, I think they'll play an interesting part. And if things start going badly for Kyrgios quickly, will he try and fire himself up by finding something else to blame, find something else to kind of get in his own head? I don't know. And not to labour this point too much, but Kyrgios often gets really wound up when he feels like other people are getting preferential treatment. I've heard him say on court, like in matches where Rafa's not playing, like, you would never do this to Rafa. It's absolute nonsense. Why would you do this? If the umpire, I'm thinking maybe like time violations here for like Novak on serve, if he's like bouncing the ball 14 times before a big point, is that the sort of thing that could just start catching fire a little bit? I don't know. There's so many unknowns with this match. But worst comes to worst, is two pretty good players who play a pretty good match. But I hope we get a bit of an explosion for me, if no one else.
Well, we shall see. As always, we shall see. The great thing about sport is we talk for hours about what's going to happen, and then we actually get an ending.
You owe me a prediction today, I believe. I guess we both should put sets on it.
Yes, I think Djokovic in 3.
Okay. I'll probably go Novak in 4, Kyrgios to win the second set in a tie-break, and then Novak just to crush his spirit. It's like one of those sets where Novak's like, I'm going to lure you in for a second, think you have a chance. You put in this monumental effort to win it, and then he's like, right, I'm taking the next one 6-1, and it's over for you, sunshine.
Very good. I think that's all we've got time for. It's been quite a long podlet, so you're lucky. Hopefully you've got time to listen to it all before the final. Wherever you're watching it, do enjoy it. Don't watch it outside if you're in the UK, I would suggest, because it's going to be absolutely roasting hot.
I'm so pleased to be going to Brighton today because it's like just naturally cooler air temperature. With like,
and you can just jump in the sea if you get too hot.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm very jealous in fairness. Although the world and his wife will be there, so it'll be pretty busy, I would suggest. Anyway, that's quite enough of George's holiday plans. Thank you so much for listening, as always, and most importantly, do come back next time.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Love tennis with Matchpoint Tennis Championships. Grab your gear and get ready for a brand new title that delivers authentic gameplay and an immersive tennis experience. Buy now from Game.